Hello, this is a different video. I'm just going to be talking about a question that will no doubt be on a few people's minds following a announcement or two I've made on Facebook and other social media. And the question would be, why am I doing Seeker all over again? So hopefully what I've got to say will explain this. Bit of background for those who may not be aware. Seeker was a novel I wrote well over a decade ago now. The first version was in 2008, self-published, but it eventually became a proper novel in 2011 when it was released by a small indie company called Hearst Books, and then digitally by Untreed Reads. It was, pretty successful. I mean, didn't make me my millions, obviously, because I wouldn't need to be working a day job and I'd be out there. But it was successful enough. It got read by loads of people, and it continued to sell digitally, certainly, right up until the contract with Untreed Reads ended. So for a good few years it sold, every month it was selling. And I got a lot of great feedback on it. People really seemed to like it. In 2011 it was put up for a Rainbow Award, which was, and I assume still is, a monthly award for best non-straight fiction. In this case it was up for best supernatural novel of 2011. Didn't win. It did end up becoming a finalist and eventually got an honourable mention, which, as far as I'm concerned, is good enough. Obviously winning would be great, but it's okay because it got an honourable mention and people loved it. It's got great reviews and people seem to get what the book was about. On the surface it's just another vampire story, although a rather complicated rendition of vampires. If I want to do vampires, I'm not going to do it as everybody else does them, obviously, because vampires, I've always been a fan. I love vampire books, I love vampire films, TV shows, not all of them, I struggle with some, hello Twilight, but it came out at a time when vampire fiction was going through its resurgence, as it does every few years, and people enjoyed that aspect of it, but people also understood that the book was ultimately about identity, in this case sexual identity. Every character was seeking something, seeking to learn about themselves. One of the themes that I explored in that book was the fluidity of sexuality, because I'm a firm believer that nobody, I don't know, I mean, we've all got preferences. I think we're all inclined to go for one gender in terms of, we're attracted to a particular gender generally. Obviously that's not true for everybody, but I think in general, you kind of, you have a preference. I, for instance, prefer men. Others prefer women. I mean, other men prefer women, other women prefer women, some prefer male and female, and that's all great. But I believe, this is purely based on my experience and people I've known over the decades, that people fall for people, ultimately. I've always maintained that although I almost always fall for men and they attract me physically and sexually, it is feasible that I could meet the right woman and we could just click and it could work. I'm not saying it will happen, the odds are probably won't, but it most certainly can happen, because I think you fall for people ultimately. And that was a discussion I thought was interesting and worth exploring. So in Seeker, I explored that, through various characters. You have the two leads, for instance, or two of the leads anyway, certainly the lead and another of the co-leads. They end up in a very different place emotionally and physically to where they begin. One was a very hetero guy, at least he believed he was, and then by the end of it he's recognizing a side of himself that he never knew, and his acceptance and resistance to it was grim in places. But you got the lead character, of course, who starts off very much accepting of the fact he's a gay man, quite happy with that life. His personal life was a load of shit, loads of pressure, everything seems to be going wrong and he needed to get away. And along the way he discovers parts of himself that he did not know, parts that ultimately sees him with a woman. So it's all about identity and the fluidity of sexuality. Now, since that book's come out, people are very aware that it was always intended to be more than one book. For a while it was a trilogy, then it was going to be 4 books, then it was a trilogy again. And people pretty much since 2011 have always asked me when's the sequel, when's Augury, as the second book was going to be called. And over the years I have returned to it a few times. Indeed, there is I think I've written a good 50,000 words of Augury. It's saved somewhere on my PC. But as the years went by, the gap between the first book and the proposed second book became wider, and narratively it needed to be only a year in between. So I did have a thought a couple of years back to actually finally do the second book, re-release the first and write the second, but I didn't want to write a book that was set 10 years ago. I wanted the book to be set in the now, because that's the whole point of these books, is to be a discussion about where we are as a society, where we are as people, and where we are in our understanding of identity. So to do a sequel, now it would create a massive narrative gap, and it would stretch credulity a bit, because to write it in the now would mean it'd be like a good, I'd say 8 or 9 years in between books, which means 8 or 9 years where the lead character has been absent and the other characters would have had to carry on, which created all kinds of dramatic inconsistencies and problems that just wouldn't flow. So it left me with the, what do I do? I mean, there's been parts of me over the years I thought, let's let it go, because I've done lots of stuff since then, all kinds of works since then. I've written, edited, devised so much stuff, various series, a few standalone things, but Seeker's always been there. It's always been there in the back of my head, and I've always I kept returning to it. It's a story I need to finish telling. I need to get back to these characters to complete the story I began. They have unfinished business. Therefore, I have unfinished business with this book, with this series. So I've been pondering that. It's like what to do. So I've ultimately come to the conclusion, to do it justice and to actually get back to the series of books properly, be they a trilogy or not, the the only logical and right way to do it would literally be to start from scratch, which presents a challenge for me, because I think Seeker as a book still holds up fairly well. There's certainly bits in it I would do differently now, on account that I have 11 years more experience as a writer and an editor behind me. So starting from scratch makes more sense. Now, from scratch, it doesn't mean I'll be writing a book, page one rewrite, and everything will be different. My goal is, it will essentially, most of the scenes from the book and the events from the original book will still be there. They may be juggled around a wee bit. The tone may be different, the characters may be slightly different, although essentially the same. And the core story will be the same. Because obviously it worked and there's people who loved it. So I don't want to alienate them. But at the same time I want to give them something new so they can still buy this new version, read it and enjoy it as a new book. But a familiar book to them. So what I'm going to do, I say it's a page one rewrite. It's a new rendition of the story, a new interpretation of the story. All the players are basically the same. Some may be renamed, a few of their background details may shift. But the challenge for me is to keep it relevant and to still be a story about identity. I need to adapt, because the discussion of identity today is quite different to the discussion of identity 11 years ago. We're at a very different place as a culture. Our understanding of identity, what identity means to people. Back then, although by saying this, I'm not saying that these things didn't exist, but they were lesser known and lesser understood and lesser in the public eye, I suppose. Back then, identity tended to be about a sexual thing. That was the thing that people mostly seem to talk about, mostly interested in. Of course, now we're in an age where identity is very much about your gender, not just your sexuality. A lot of youngsters, for instance, have come to terms with who they believe they are in ways that we always have, but now people are more free to explore the fact that some believe they were born in the wrong body, that their authentic self, as my trans friend Maddie always says, was, in her case, female, even though she was born man, or born male, rather. And that's something I want to explore in this book, because that's where we are. That's what identity means to people today. Your gender, other than, as well as the usual stuff of identity, just generally feeling like you belong, what's your purpose in life, how you fit with your family, your friends, your work, all these different things that help us with identities. Now it's very much about gender. So I want to explore that within the context of this book, which left me with a challenge, how to do this. And I came to the conclusion that one of the main characters, I'm going to basically change their gender, but not just wholesale, like a male character is now a female character. To explore the identity discussion, I'm going to make them actually trans. So this male character within the narrative was born male, but always believed their authentic self was female. I haven't decided where this character's journey is in terms of transition journey is, whether they're newly transitioned, or they're still transitioning, or they're just pre-transitioning, because I think there's lots of drama to be explored in all aspects and all stages of this. and the more I talk to my trans friends, the more I understand. So the challenge for me will be to expand my knowledge, expand my understanding, and I'll be doing this through research, through talking to people, and through the writing. Because I want to make this as real, as honest and as authentic as possible. I want to make this discussion within the narrative relatable to as many people as possible. And maybe, just maybe, to those people who don't get the trans thing, who find it difficult to understand. And I get that, because there was a time when I was also one of these people who just didn't get it. Intellectually, yeah. On a visceral level, it just didn't click with me. I want and hope that through this story, through the way I explore this, and if I make it real and honest enough, that people who don't understand today, they'll gain some understanding, and maybe will change their outlook. Because that's, ultimately that's what art does. It's a reflection of today, and story can challenge people. And I think the best stories do challenge people. I have, a lot of my understanding of life, of the world, is usually shaped and challenged by the fiction I enjoy, be it in prose or TV or audio, whatever the fiction is. So this is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm starting again. It's a challenge, not purely from a talk, the discussion of the day. It's a challenge in a purely technical sense as well, because I'm listening through Seeker, to get it all back in my head again. As I'm going, I'm thinking, ooh, I could change that. Ooh, how will I play this scene? Because I was about to tell you, if Jake is now a transitioned female, then how much does it change the relationship the Jake character had with Will, now that Jake is no longer Jake? Essentially the same character, but somewhat different past experiences and their dynamic. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because as somebody pointed out to me yesterday, and I've always known this, and they're actually right. Trans people aren't a monolith, just like gay people aren't a monolith. Lesbians aren't a monolith. There's various different types. There's various different experiences, understandings, perceptions of life, and ways of being. Like I've got a trans friend who's very feminine. I have one who's not so much, who curiously is quite laddish in the way she interacts with some of the lads. So on the spectrum, as it were, it's there's very different extremes sometimes. So I'm in a odd place of wondering with the new version of Jake, who currently I'm calling Jackie, but I think that's too simple, so I may change that. Do I make her a more masculine trans woman? Just so, because if I do that, then I don't need to change the scenes too much. I don't need to change their dynamic too much. But if I make her more feminine, that would shift the dynamic in a very different way, which I suppose as a writer would make it more interesting. I don't know. I have lots to work out yet. I've got a book specifically to make my notes on, to work out this and that, characters. A few names have changed to protect the not innocent. But yes, so that's basically why I'm doing this. And I've set myself quite the challenge. A lot of the work will be done in December, because I've set aside time in December. I won't be doing any candy job stuff in December, for instance. I'll be just in terms of creatively focus on Seeker. Even the title, I have played around with changing the title, but Seeker is such a known aspect, brand, whatever, in connection to me, that it seems it's a tough one. Do I change it so I make it very clear it's a different book, or do I keep it similar so people know it's the same but different? I've got a feeling, because originally, as people know, Seeker was the title of the book. The series was called The Garden. I got a feeling what I'm going to do is Seeker will be the name of the series. So this will be Seeker Book 1. But the book will most likely be called The Children of Kemi, or Kemi. Not sure how that word's pronounced, but it's the Coptic word for Egypt. And of course, those who've read the book originally will understand where the connection there is. So yes, the title, I haven't quite laid it, but I think it's almost certainly going to be called The Children of Kemi, Seeker Book 1. Just so Seeker's still in there for those who see it and go, okay, I know this is connected to the original book, but obviously that's why I'm making this video, and the press release, and even the book cover, be it in the back or the front, will make it clear this is a new rendition of that book. So those who read the book, who love the book, come back, read this new version. Hopefully you will enjoy it as much, if not more. You'll get some new things out of it, and it will definitely be a follow-up, because that's the whole point. This will, I think, the instinct would be to make it a trilogy, so the story's told. But I have a feeling, because this has lived with me for so long now, I have a feeling that it could well become an ongoing thing. We'll see. We'll see how much story there is. We'll see where the characters lead, because they do have a habit of doing that, because clearly they've not left me. But yeah, either way, it's going to be great to get back to it. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be fun, because as a writer, I've learned a lot since 2011. As an editor, I have really honed my skill, and I am pretty good at self-editing, at seeing stuff and saying no, because I often look at my own work as I would look at somebody else's work and say, no, this makes no sense, no, this doesn't work, get rid of it. I can be quite brutal with myself on that regard. Hello, darling. That was my little kitty. You're beautiful. So yeah, I've moved on. Not only just as a writer, but just as a person. Me today, who's nearly 50, is quite different from the me 11 years ago, who was only nearly 39. Well, actually, when it came out, I was only just gone 38, actually. Doesn't seem that long ago, and yet it does. So yeah, I've been through a whole lot of experience since then. I've met a whole lot of different people, and I've learned a lot as a person, and hopefully that will reflect in the book. It'll be more me than, see, all the other stuff I write. There's definitely bits of me, obviously, in these books. Some of my viewpoints, some viewpoints I don't have, but I find interesting to consider. So in this book, there'll be a lot of that again. But yeah, anyway, I hope you all pick it up. Hope you all enjoy it, or at least feel challenged by it. And I hope you support this book, because it's a sort of a risk for the publisher as well, because to their mind the book's been out, it's been done, and they're not convinced there's a market for it, but they're willing to allow me to take the risk, which is great. Shows a certain confidence in myself, I guess, which is nice. But whether it succeeds or not is not going to be just based on how well I write the book, because that's obviously going to be a big thing. It depends on you people, you guys and girls who buy it. So when it's up for pre-order, indeed it will be up for pre-order when this video goes on YouTube, because I shall release this video the same day that we do the press release, because this is basically a part of the press release. The book will be up for order. The link will be in the description below. So yes, I implore you, please pre-order it. The more pre-orders we get, the more hopefully the publisher will back it, will feel confident in this project, and spread the word. I mean, especially you guys who like the original version, spread the word, let people know, because word of mouth is key. You know, some of the, I say best books, some of the most successful and popular books that have been sold over the decades have ultimately been so through word of mouth. You look at Harry Potter, I mean, the odds of this becoming even close to that, not that very high, but you know, we can aim high, right? Word of mouth, you know, that's where it all began. Twilight, all these things. Every book has the potential to be a huge success, especially if it's a book that has something interesting to say. So please pre-order it. I know it won't be out until next year, but pre-orders are essential, especially at this point. So please, 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 please click the link, pre-order it, and let's make this a huge success. Not just for me, but so that you guys can get to the end of the story, which, you know, for those of you who waited since 2011, it's about time, right? I'm not just doing this for me, I'm doing it because I want to finish the story. I want you guys to finally get to the end of the story and hopefully enjoy it. So yes, thank you for listening to me babble on for the last half hour. I hope this gives you a bit of understanding of why I'm doing this, and interests you enough that you are going to pre-order this book and help me make it a success, because ultimately it will only be a success with you guys. So thank you in advance, and I'll see you out there.